Welcome to First Light, the podcast where we explore what it really means to rise and transform. Today, I'm joined by someone whose career bridges the courtroom, the boardroom, and the cutting edge of legal innovation, Tad Thomas. Tad is the founder and managing partner of Thomas Law Offices in Louisville, Kentucky, with offices in multiple states. He's a nationally recognized trial lawyer, past president of the American Association of Justice, and an entrepreneur who has launched several ventures focused on digital marketing and video production for the legal industry. From securing multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements for clients to leading one of the largest trial lawyer associations in the country to helping law firms harness technology and marketing in new ways, Tad's story is one in reinvention, leadership, and staying ahead of the curve. Today, we'll explore his journey, the lessons he's learned in building a multifaceted career, and how he continues to drive change in the legal profession. Tad, thank you for joining me today on First Light. I want to kind of take us back to when this all began for you, what your early career was like, what you drew you to law, for those who may not know you.
Yeah, it was just kind of by happenstance. I remember I was making a fire in my, I was in college. It was my sophomore year in college. I was just going to go work for the family business, and I'm putting a fire and I'm wadding up paper to get the fire started. And I saw this article, and for whatever reason, it caught my eye, and it was about an attorney in Louisville. His name was Frank Haddad, and Frank was like the be all end all of criminal defense lawyers, and I started reading it. And my mom saw me reading it. And she goes, your grandfather's friends with Frank. And not too long later, I'm bagging groceries in our family grocery. And Frank comes in, and my grandfather says, "Hey, Tad might want to go to law school." And he says, "Hey, come be a runner for me next summer." And then it took off from there. So I worked for Frank, and then Frank unfortunately passed away the next year, and worked for Bobby, who was Frank's brother, for a couple years. I get into law school, and one of the guys that shared office space with them took me under his wing, Ron Hillerick, and he was a civil trial lawyer. He did products liability, med mal, car wrecks, and all the stuff I do now. And Ron took me under his wing, said, "I'll pay for your rent, and here's a stack of cases. I'll teach you how to practice law." And that was the beginning. And the article that I read on Frank is actually now framed in my Louisville office. So I see it every day.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about, because I mean, obviously, I grew up in Kentucky, and I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, being a fellow Kentuckian. So talk about kind of your growing up in Kentucky and how that kind of shaped you and shaped the person you are today.
Yeah, it really did. Family is everything for me. I came from, I mentioned the family grocery. I came from an immigrant family. My grandfather came over to the United States when he was 7 from Lebanon, and started working. Dropped out of school when he's in middle school and started the family business, and it grew. My aunts and my uncles and my cousins, everybody worked in the family business, and that's what put me through college, and it gave me a sense of work ethic. I was expected to work on Saturdays and Sundays when I was in school, and if I wasn't playing baseball in the summer, I was expected to work in the summer. When I was old enough to bag groceries, I bagged groceries. When I was old enough to work a meat counter, I worked the meat counter. When I was old enough to run a cash register, I did that. And that really taught me the entrepreneurial spirit, partly, which is plays into a lot of what I've built. And then you got to work hard and treat people right. It's my family. I remember when my grandfather died, people from all over town came in and told stories about things that my grandfather did to help them that even my family didn't know. And I learned from that, and that's really important to me. Giving back to the community, it's a lot of what we do now too as a firm.
What do you think your time working in a grocery store, taught you and helped you to build the firm that you built now, being a multi-state, big and growing firm?
Part of it is understanding people. Being in customer service. My friends that are trial lawyers that were servers. Worked in restaurants or bartenders. People that work in that service industry and that service community are a lot better standing up in front of a jury. It doesn't matter how book smart you are. You got to understand people. You got to be able to read a room. And I grew up working with customers, and so I learned quite a bit from that. And then yeah, the entrepreneurial spirit, just the constant desire for wanting to grow the business and take care of the people that work for you. That's a huge thing for me too. is, we don't have a whole lot of turnover in our firm at all. And that's because I really place a priority uh, in having a good work culture, firm culture, and, taking care of the people that do good work for you and treating them like family as best you can.
Let's talk about their early days of starting your own law firm, and then also, I know you went into the public sector a little bit, so kind of talk about the lessons kind of learned along the way, and and all of us have some challenges along the way, some stumbling blocks along the way, and how you come overcome some of those to now be as successful as you are with multi-million-dollar verdicts. The president of the AAJ, which is no small feat as well. So all that hard work and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, so I started my own firm right out of law school. 2000, I was a solo, and I did that for 8 years, just doing car wrecks. I mean, I don't know. My first trial I was 2 years out of school, and I did a medical malpractice case where a baby passed away. It was a failure to diagnose a congenital heart defect, and I was 2 years out of school. It was right at 2 years because it was fall of that second year. The trial right after that was an attempted murder case where the guy was looking 20 to life. I was assigned counsel from the public defender's office, so I didn't start off small. But I did, I did the solo thing for 8 years and really enjoyed it. And that's the model that I came from. I shared office space with a bunch of guys that were solos, and that was kind of my aspirations was, I would work with these guys, and they all had great careers and did very well and took care of their families, but they never had any interest in growing, and at the time I didn't either. Then one of my friends that I shared office space with got elected Attorney General of Kentucky, and so I went to Frankfurt and I worked for Jack for 3 years. I went from being a solo practitioner, my mom was my legal assistant, to running. I was the number three in the Attorney General's office, running 6 divisions under me with over 100 employees. I had over 50 lawyers, and that was overnight. So I had to learn management pretty damn quick. And that was interesting. I learned so much when I was there. And I worked with a lot of really great people at the AG's office. And after 3 years of that, I just decided I was ready to go back into private practice. So I restarted my firm in 2011. In 2013, I hired my first associate, and now here we are in 2025. We've got 6 offices, and just hired my 19th lawyer. So, you know, from somewhere around 2011, 2012, it just clicked, and I'm like, maybe I do want to grow, and here we are.
What do you think that mindset shift was, or what really kind of fed that mindset shift from I'm a solo to I want to grow this big firm?
At some point you have to make the decision. Every lawyer that becomes successful and can generate business, you've come to that point where you have to make the decision: do I want to grow and hire people to handle all these calls that are coming in, or do you want to just pick and choose your cases and handle just few big cases? And there's every model in between. And I guess it's just because of my mentality growing up, working in the grocery and seeing that business grow. The idea that you were turning away business was just antithetical to who I was. And so I decided, all right, I'm going to hire an associate. I've got too much work. I'm going to hire an associate. She's going to help me, do all these cases. Well, then you wake up the next day after you hire that person, you realize, well, crap, now I got to get enough business in to feed two of us. I got to take care of her family and mine. So now you hustle more, and then you start generating more cases when you're like, well, now I need a third person, and then next thing you know, you got 6 offices, and so I mean, it's almost it's almost an addiction. It really is. And I love every minute of it. And part of it's just because I work with such great people, top to bottom in my firm, lawyers to the medical records team to the intake team. We have great people in my firm, and I love coming to work every day. I absolutely love it, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
One thing you said about addiction, I think it's so true. I've talked a lot on this podcast about my personal journey and my struggles with alcohol for the biggest part of my life because alcohol is such a kind of a big part of the legal profession, but the personal injury bar specifically. And for 2.5 years, I've not had a drink, and it's been great. But I've changed it with other addictions. One is growing and building a business, and I see how addicted I
Yeah.
am to this now. And, you can argue it's a much healthier addiction, but that, and then obviously training, working out. But in speaking of that, let's talk about those challenges and how you kind of approach it all, because 19 person or 19 attorney law firm, multi states. There's a lot of stress and pressure there. I know you're also an entrepreneur and have other businesses that you've been a part of and grown, and then also taking on leadership opportunities like the AAJ. How do you go about handling all these? We can call them addictions or whatever we want to call them, but how do you handle
Hmm.
juggling these types of things and keep yourself in a healthy place to continue to grow, continue to innovate, and continue to lead?
It's time management, first of all. People talk about work-life balance. I don't have a work-life balance. Work is my life. And, to some extent, I've had to reprioritize recently because, as you know, you live an unhealthy lifestyle. When you're on the road, when I was president of AAJ, I took 120 flights that year, and I was all over the country. And I had a little health scare while that was all going on. And my buddy's one of my best friends is a cardiologist, and he's like, Tad, you got to stop eating and drinking your way across the country, because everywhere I'd go, every town I'd go to, you have a dinner, and like you talk about, personal injury lawyers especially, and alcohol. Every dinner I went to, people know me from Kentucky. I'd have a bourbon there when I got to sat down at the table, and we'd split a bottle of wine, and everybody wanted to take me to the best steakhouse in their town. And I remember one night I had been out to dinner 11 out of the last 12 nights, and I was here in Chicago with some friends. We go to a steakhouse, and all my buddies order steak, and this is after my health scare, and it comes around to me, and I had to whisper to the waiter. I was like, "Hey, I want the beet salad with chicken." And he goes, and somebody heard me, and they go, "You ordered what?" I said, "Guys, you don't understand. I'm going to die. I can't just keep doing this." And so finally, it just kind of dawned on me. It's like, I got to get healthy. And, so that was kind of the start of, hey, you don't have to split a bottle of wine every meal. You got to get in the gym. You got to work out. And so I really did start prioritizing health. I started boxing back in January this year. Absolutely love it. I'm addicted to that too. Love getting in and getting the cardio that way. But when you talk about how do you grow and how do you grow the firm, it's all team building. It's hiring the right people, and a lot of it's getting lucky too. I've been very fortunate with the people that I work with. I was the Zoom right before this one. I was on with my buddy Brian, who came to work for me. I think he was probably like my fifth lawyer, sixth lawyer. He's been with me, 5 or 6 years now. And when we try cases, we just know what each other's thinking, and we fit into our roles in the trials, and we've been really successful. He was a nurse in long term care before he went to law school, and we just love trying these nursing home cases. And he's been great. I got a great CFO. I got a great director of operations. The first lawyer I ever hired, Lindsay, that was my first associate in 2013, is still with me today. And now she's a general counsel for the firm and for my side businesses, and then handles about a half docket of nursing home cases too. And I've just been. You can't do it without good people. There's just no way. And I've been very fortunate to have really really good people around me.
Well, they also say that good people attract good people, but is there any secret sauce?
You know, all I can say, I don't know if it's secret sauce, but you got to treat people right. When you hire someone and you realize they're an A player, then you have to take care of that person, and you got to show that you care. And it's not just financial. It's when something happens in their family and they need a couple days off, you give them a couple days off. And yeah, my name's on the door, and I'm admitted in 4 states and whatever, and they see me as whatever role I play in the office. But if somebody needs me to cover motion hour on Monday because they got to take their kid to the doctor, I'm putting a tie on and I'm showing up. And that's what you do, and you just got to take good care of them. I guess the other thing too is if you see an A player that's available on the market, even if you don't think you have a spot for them, you got to get them in. You got to go ahead and hire that person, find a spot for them because they're going to end up, they're going to appreciate it. And and it's gonna pay off much later. So I always, when good people are available for me to hire, the most recent hire is actually one of my old law school professors. He's 77 years old. He doesn't want to quit practicing, and he's going to add so much to the office. It's from a different perspective, just because of his seniority. But he handles these big class actions. He tries med mal cases, and just having him on board is just gonna really add to the firm. I'm really glad to have him.
Yeah. I know you have this entrepreneurial spirit, but to grow in a successful law firm is a challenge on its own. What kind of inspired you to step into other businesses beyond just your law firm?
And that goes back to the family and the entrepreneurial spirit. I decided well, actually, let me correct that. Part of it is I also learned from my dad, be a little bit cheap, be frugal. So the first company I started was because I wanted to start doing a website and wanted SEO for my firm. And I started pricing it out. And I'm like, this is stupid. Why am I paying this? I can hire somebody that can do this for the same cost. And so it made no sense. And it just so happened that my partner Ryan, who's my partner in my website company, we've been together. We've been together as a company for over 9 years now. But I worked with him for a couple of years when he was with a different company. And I woke up one night and thought, this is crazy. So I said, woke up the next day. I said, Ryan, guess what? I just started a company doing web development, SEO. Do you want to be my partner? And he's like, yeah. And so, here we are. We started that Legal Insights 9 years ago, this past spring, and it's been great. And that led to Gavel Video. My buddy Mike, who runs our Missouri office, is one of our partners in Gavel Video, and we turned that into Gavel Marketing. And I woke up one day and was tired of waiting for someone to write trial practice software the way that I try cases. And so I said, well, damn it, I'm just going to do software. And that's a whole story in and of itself. It cost me a lot of money to develop a product that I'm totally redoing in between now and the end of the year. So they're all like, most of my businesses are tangential to practicing law. I have a bar too. I guess you could say that's tangential to practicing law, but yeah, but it's been fun. I like doing different projects. I like being involved in different organizations. I love practicing law and trying cases, but I like the diversity of my time and doing different things.
Well, I want to ask you because a lot of times we start down this path. We have this great idea, and I want to ask you because what you said about your software, how cost you a lot of time, a lot of money, and now you're going to redo it completely. So, talk a little bit about that experience and what kind of maybe went right, what kind of maybe went wrong, and where you're going with it. Because I think there's a real learning there.
Yeah, so if you ever heard Richard Branson talk about how he started Virgin Records and Virgin Airlines, he called it Virgin because he had no idea what he was doing when he started it. And so hence the name Virgin. And that's kind of what happened with me in software. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to do it. And I went out and hired a dev team that was absolutely terrible, took forever, cost me a ton of money, and ended up with a product I didn't like. And so I had to do a new dev team, spent 2 or 3 years trying to save the code that we did first. Next thing we're 5 years later, and I've got the product is done, but it's written for 2020. It's not written for 2025. And now you got Claude and ChatGPT, you got AI, you have all of these new things available. And so now I'm sitting here with a product that's 5 years old that just got finished. I'm like, damn it, this sucks. So, I have some really good friends that help me with the software, and I've kind of helped them with some of their businesses and stuff. And, they came to me and they're like, here's what we would do with it. And because they've been working with me for so many years, and they know, they've interviewed me about practicing law and trying cases and how it works. So we just about a month ago we came up with a brand new concept, and we're totally redoing it and hope to have it out January or February. that's going to be a whole new way of, or new software for litigation and working with documents and presenting at trial and presenting in depositions. And, it's going to have an AI component to it and everything. I'm really excited about it.
Well, speaking of that, because the world has changed in the last 5 years, and the tech has changed, and I always like to kind of talk about how lawyers were kind of 10 years behind the curve. It seems like doctors in other areas are doing something well before we are. For example, I'd go to the dentist, I'd get a text message reminding me about my appointment, I'd get a text message following up, and all types of things. And like lawyers, we didn't have any of that forever. And now it's starting to be a lot more commonplace in use. So, where do you see technology kind of changing the game? And I don't want you to keep it just the law firms because you are so diverse in your
Mhm.
businesses. But how is technology really changing business in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, starting with the law firm, I always say there's been three technological revolutions since I've been practicing law or been involved in the law. The first was when we went from the typewriter to the PC. That happened when I was a law clerk and a runner, however many years ago. The second was really around like 2010s, 2011, when cloud computing became in vogue. And you talk about us being 5 or 10 years late. Attorneys were 5 to 10 years late on cloud computing. Other companies and businesses had been doing it well before law firms started adopting it. I remember early on when I would do technology presentations, the idea of keeping your client's data in the cloud just I mean, the lawyers went berserk. Oh, that's a violation of confidentiality. Like, no, it's not. And I've been doing, ethics talks on technology for, 15 years now. And so the cloud computing, high speed internet, that was the next revolution, and now it's AI, and it's changing so quickly. I've really kind of been hesitant about investing in any company that wants me to do a year-long contract because in a year there's going to be five other companies that do what they do, and so I've been very careful about where I'm putting my money when it comes to AI. But if you do what we do as plaintiffs lawyers and you don't have AI, you're going to be left behind. It's about efficiency. It's about quality of your product. There's so many advantages to having it in your toolbox at this point. And then the same thing with other businesses. The AI has changed the way that you code and write software. AI has changed the way that you do design. AI has changed the way that you do marketing. So there's going to be so many things over the next 5 years. You're going to hire differently because your law clerks, you're going to want to ask them what experience they have with AI in their law schools and using different types of software. You're going to want paralegals that know how to write prompts, that have actually taken classes on that from a paralegal perspective, because the role of your paralegals are absolutely going to change. Hopefully courts keep up with these technology revolutions. It's There's nothing after lawyers, as far as the delay in adopting technology, the next is courts. So let's hope the courts actually keep up with us and make it easier for us to practice.
Yeah. One other thing I want to talk to you about is just kind of your time. You talked about those 120 plus plane flights. I remember that year that you were president and follow you around on your different journeys. Through social media. But what did that time teach you? What did you learn through that year being president? But more importantly, your time on the executive board as a whole. But what did you really learn through that experience?
Obviously, I'm a big proponent of AAJ. I love the organization. I love what we do. What I've learned, going back to my first involvement in AAJ, is how important it is to have an organization that lobbies for us and for our clients in DC, because there's nobody else to do it. And if you're not involved in AAJ, you should be. You at least need to be a member, because if it wasn't for AAJ, we wouldn't have practices. There certainly would be no such thing as medical malpractice. There's probably immunity on all kinds of products had it not been for AAJ. So one thing I've learned in my experience is the value of having that national association to do the lobbying and to advocate for us. The other thing that I've learned is, AAJ, the cream rises to the top, And the best trial lawyers in the country are the ones that work hard every day to learn more about their craft. You spend time working on how you take depositions and how you try cases and learning new causes of action. Um, so my experience in AJ has been that I've developed a peer group that is frankly superior to other lawyers all across the country, plaintiffs lawyers included. It's that group of people that are actively involved in AAJ that spend time teaching, educating other lawyers, advocating for other lawyers. It's a special group of people that make me better at my job, and it's a privilege to teach for AJ because I get to teach with other people that I really learn from. Uh, you know, you got to be a member. You got to be involved.
Two final questions for you. The first is, if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, looking back on all the stuff that you've accomplished, what would it be?
Oh wow. I think patience. Maybe telling my younger self that look, all good things take effort. They take time. There is no in this business, the lawyers that you see that have overnight success, there's always a story behind it as to why it's not as successful as you think it is, and it's a flash in the pan. To build it right, to have the right people around you, and to wake up every day loving what you do, it takes work and it takes patience. Here I am. I just turned 51, and in some ways I feel like I'm young, in other ways I feel like I'm the old man in the courtroom. But I probably wouldn't have listened when I was my younger self anyway. But yeah, I'd probably talk about, I'd tell myself be patient, work hard every day, and be patient.
I can't agree more. And the last one is, again, I have my opinions on this. It's been a while, but what's the best Kentucky bourbon?
All right, so that's like asking who your favorite child is. You're not supposed to answer that question. And it's, bourbon's like wine. You might want a white one day, you might want a red one day. When it comes to bourbon, sometimes I want 140 proof, sometimes I want something a little lighter, sometimes I want a rye, sometimes, want something a little more smoky. So I have, a couple hundred bottles in my basement, and it just depends on the day and what I feel like. Am I smoking a cigar or am I having it with a steak?
That's the political answer there, or the easy answer. So I'll let you take the easy way out, Tad. I want to thank you for your time. I know that in this conversation there was a lot that I learned and took away from this conversation. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, man. Congratulations on all your success too.
Thanks, Tad. Tad, thank you for sharing your journey and the lessons you've learned along the way. From fighting for justice in the courtroom to pioneering new ways for lawyers to connect with clients and juries, your story is a reminder that growth comes from embracing change and leading with purpose. Until next time, keep shining your light.